Hi guys, it's Carlo here. Thank you for listening to our latest episode. It's the support of our community like you that allows us to continue to grow and make this into something truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to listen to it without the interruption of ads and maybe even experience some bonus content, I'd invite you to join us on our newly launched Patreon. And if maybe that's not something you can do right now, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on places like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that good stuff. You'll find us under @Millennials and Community for pretty much all of those. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Millennials and Community Podcast. On this week's episode, we explore online communities, how they rised in popularity over the pandemic, how true friendships can actually be born over a keyboard, and why if you don't have a community to call home, online might be a great option for you. Thank you for being part of our community. Hey there, guys. Welcome to the latest episode of the Millennials and Community Podcast. I'm Carlo. That is Matt. You will notice this is a little bit of a different format for us. This is the kind of format that we usually film Infomax in, but just due to some scheduling and some time constraints, we're bringing you episode number 5 this way as well. I'm sure you guys will be fine with it. It'll be all good. It's going to be a great episode anyways. So we're gonna kind of jump right into it with our opening icebreaker, and I'm super excited to hear what Matt's response to this one is going to be. I have a feeling, if you were a character in a video game, what would be your ideal side quest?
All right, so I had to do a lot of thinking about this because, as you would have heard in our last episode, I'm certainly not as invested in video games as you are. So it took me a lot of thinking about games that I've liked. And then I took it a different direction. I'm like, well, what would my real life skills actually allow me to be successful at in a gaming sense? So picture this. Picture if they made the Bachelor and Bachelorette franchise a video game. I would be the character who's like facilitating, like the Chris Harrison or the I forget, Jesse Palmer, I think, whoever the host of the game is, and my quest is to like facilitate these like connections within the reality show in a way that tries to navigate whatever sorts of character drama happen, maybe loss or theft, maybe verbal harassment of other people within the house. So I would be like the host of the show, facilitating the dynamic in the games and the interconnections between people.
Okay, and that's interesting that you say that, because as somebody who doesn't play a lot of video games, I wouldn't be surprised that you don't know this. There isn't a, TV show host simulator that I'm aware of, but the amount of simulator style games out there, farming simulator, trucking simulator, video game maker simulator, there's an endless list, surgeon simulator. There are a lot of those kinds of games that are specifically tuned to like just wanting to live out that one aspect of life. So I find it funny, and now I'm on the hunt to find TV show host simulator for Matt. Maybe it'll be the first production of the Millennials and Community Gaming Studio. Who knows? ChatGPT, work your magic.
Love it. What about you?
Well, the obvious answer is to catch them all, because to train them is my cause.
You aren't going to sing it fully? You can't just voice record it. You need to sing it out.
That'll be exclusive to our Patreon. No, I'm not that ostentatious tonight. I just finished at the gym, so it's going to take all my energy and a whole bunch of coffee. All right.
Join it on the Discord or on the Patreon to hear Carlo's karaoke rendition of the Pokemon theme.
There you go. Maybe I'll Italian opera it up a bit. All right. So what is today's episode all about? Well, today's episode is going to be a little bit of an extension of episode number 4, in spirit mostly, but it's about the idea of digital tribes, digital communities. This is something that, I think a lot of millennials have found some home in, whether you're a gamer or you're not. There's lots of online communities available to us. And in this episode, we're going to explore them a little bit. we're going to maybe give some examples of how people tune into those communities and how the pandemic maybe had an effect on growing that for people that might have never experienced it or tried it out before. And the reason that we think this is something that we want to talk about today is because that's in essence what we're trying to do, is create a digital and online community for our listeners, for people that want to engage and be part of something, not only as a listening group, but as an opportunity to be of support of each other, and to, be able to bounce ideas off of, because not everybody has that in their, what I'm going to refer to as their IRL or in real life kind of experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that online communities are so fascinating to look at, to deal with. Certainly a lot of people would point to the start of Facebook as really the conventional beginning of online communities, but that's actually not true at all. We'll go into a bit of the history here soon, but you'll find out that online communities date back way further than I had any concept that they do. And it's interesting because these communities, they so often get a bad rap, social media in particular, for the negative components and the things that can happen as a result of the connectivity that social media and online communities allow. However, we did see in the pandemic that so much social isolation was happening when we weren't able to connect in person a lot of the time. And so we really turned to these online forms of communication, these online forms of connection. And so it really became this irony of online community became our only community. And now as we move past the pandemic, we're now trying to figure out how to balance both. And are we balancing both better or worse than we did pre-2020?
Yeah, it is, as somebody that spends a lot of time in these online communities, it is somewhat difficult to balance both. I will for sure say that can be a thing, because you're going throughout your regular workday, and you're in my case, my Discord is popping off all the time, and we're talking about all sorts of different things. And to take away from the things that are going on in your real life to, go and have that conversation, as somebody who's already not great on answering text messages and being part of group chats, especially group chats, balancing those communities can be somewhat difficult. And I think it's really cool, though, that we are in this time period that means you can have all of these diverging interests and all of these diverging communities and have them all be part in some way of your life on a day-to-day basis, because that's never existed before. It was literally one or the other. You had no other choice, right? So Matt, you've kind of put together a little bit of an interesting timeline of what online communities looked like. And when I read through this, I didn't actually realize that a lot of this existed. I got some stuff to add to it, but why don't you go ahead and take us through that history, and I'll comment on anything I think that's particularly interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people would point to Facebook as the first significant version of an online community. And certainly Facebook revolutionized how we think of online communities, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it turns out that online communities have actually existed since the 1970s, believe it or not. And so these typically were text-only pages, as you can imagine, with what computers and PCs looked like back then. And one of the first online communities was called Talk-O-Matic. And really, it was the first ever multi-user online chat system. And every what we all think of as the classic 3 dots waiting for somebody to reply. This was actually the first system where you could see in real time when people were typing. And so this really evolved from the 1970s into the mid-70s. You started to see the advent or the invention of online bulletin boards. And this is really where you start seeing online conversations centering or honing in on specific topics, specific areas of interest. So you picture, certainly, at least for a lot of millennials, one of your first interactions with working in an online community, a school-based, were discussion boards, right? You'd log in, you'd type an answer to a group question, and you'd post it. This was very much what these mid-70s online bulletin boards were like. One person could post at a time, and then you have the opportunity to connect to everybody's posts sequentially.
And one thing that I want to point out about these items that Matt is mentioning, up until this point, from what I understand, the majority of this is what we were referring to as intranet communication, not internet communication. Now, what's the difference? Intranet means it's within the network or the organization's internal communication. So you may have already the small fledgling examples of these communities cropping up, but it's people that all work within the same company, that within the same kind of organization. So one of the big examples of this would be NASA. They did a lot of their early communication through personal desktop computers because they were one of the few organizations that actually had that ability. So to see that, in the off hours, these guys would go on and create their own special interest groups to talk, with the other people they worked with about something outside of work, is really cool, just to show you how even the people that you do have in common things with, you'll still find other things that you can communicate about and be part of. So I think that's really cool. And then as we kind of move into the next examples, we're going to start seeing more of the internet kind of stuff.
Yeah, for those of you who are wondering, like I just did, and the beauty of doing these recordings online is I have the ability to do some quick digging. For context, we're talking about the mid-70s. The World Wide Web, as we come to know it today, started in 1993. So there was virtually a 20-year gap between the original, what we know, or what was known as online through text-only communication virtually, to today with what we know as the classic WWW. So that was the mid-70s. 1985, there was a phenomenon called WELL. This was the Whole Earth Electronic Link. Now, when WELL was really at its peak, it had 7,000 members, and again, this was really the biggest, as certainly wasn't coined social media, but the biggest gathering of people on a single online community to that date. And then, of course, in the early 2000s, we jump ahead quite a bit, and you start to see true social media arising. And this is, there's a big shift that happens here, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit more after the history piece. But in the early 2000s, the intention of online communities changed. It went from being a place where you would connect with other people about a specific subject matter, and it transferred into trying to integrate somebody's real life connections into an online world. So this is where you look at, of course, Facebook friends and trying to find people that you can friend on Facebook, trying to figure out where all of your high school friends have gone to and where they're all at. This was really the intent of the new age 2000s social media. No longer were you talking about specific areas of interest. You were trying to find the people you already knew and find a way to keep up with them in real life, whether that was through live chat, push notifications, even video calling starts to get integrated at this time in some of these platforms.
Yeah, and I think the big one for a lot of millennials that we're gonna recall is MSN, right? Logging into MSN after school to talk to the people that you saw at school all day. But again, another interesting example is I know in my personal experience, I would have conversations with people on MSN that I might not normally have a conversation with in person at school. There was something, we start to see that the creation of almost a sense of anonymity and protection that the digital world tends to offer us. And like a big example of that would be sometimes the way people will comment and act, on social media nowadays, where they would never do that in real life. But the more innocent version of that, I think, is just that, hey, I don't know you terribly well in the real world, so I may not have the courage to come up to you and talk to you directly, but I'm more than happy to, click send a message and shoot you over an emoji as a way of breaking the ice, so to speak. So for me, MSN was a really big one. I spent far too much time on my parents' 1998 IBM. Continue, Matt.
Well, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on MSN. The first time that I was on MSN, it was when, back when I started volunteering with kids in the summer camp, it would be the other volunteers that wanted to chat outside of work. And it's like some of these early friendships were people that I connected with in a work setting. And then, you don't have a ton of time in that context to really get to know somebody. So you start to connect with them virtually. So I wanted to kind of go from there and think about some of the purpose that online communities serve. And I guess in terms of like the context of the history that we just talked about, what I think is weird, well, maybe not weird because everything tends to be cyclical in some way. I'm thinking of fashion and other things of that nature, but the purpose and the history of online communities weirdly cyclical, right? Like we talked about how in the 70s, 80s, really online communities started out as being special interest groups. Mm-hmm. And, then it forms a different identity as we start to see the advent of MSN, MySpace, Facebook, some of these communities that are trying to bring people together that have these connections in the real world and find a way to almost catalog or library or connections. But then you start to see it loop back, right? So now there's Facebook groups and Carlo, I don't know how far you went into our sheet, so I don't know if you know the answer, but do you know how many Facebook groups there are approximately in the world?
According to the generously provided notes from Matt, over 600 million.
See, this is a test to see if you actually read my notes. Yes, there is over 600 million Facebook groups. Now, what's wild about that is, we've come so far now that we're looping back to creating these special interest groups that are so private, and not only just private groups within social media platforms, but of course you see some influential figures going so far as to either purchase or start their own niche platforms that are designed for specific audiences. And it just really speaks to the different trends and how our world diverges and converges.
Yeah, it's I think that there's always going to be that subset of people that, for lack of a better term, don't follow the trend, right? Where they were some of the first to adopt this kind of technology. They were maybe some of the last ones to hold on to it. They're still using it. Like, I don't think MSN is active anymore, but it's stuck around for actually a lot longer than people realized that it did, way past the advent of Facebook. So the fact that there's always going to be those kind of people that stick around because this is where they've developed a home for themselves mean that eventually when the masses do kind of come back to that thing, that community's grown, it's changed, it's become even more evolved and even more capable than it was before. And I think that is something that is inherently unique to online communities. I think about video games. This is a great example of this phenomenon. There are very often going to be a game that when it comes out, people play endlessly, right? They'll play it. That's all they play, hour upon hour. And then slowly but surely other games will come out and people will start to kind of fall off and go to those other games. But there's always that core group of people that will stick around and continue to play. And then there'll be an update or there'll be something and the masses will flock back with this sense of surprise and wonder of, oh, look at this amazing new thing and look how much it's evolved. Meanwhile, you've had that core group of people holding down the fort and building that community from within. And that doesn't really happen in the real world. In the real world, if everybody leaves, that business shuts down, that organization somewhat shuts down. But because there's very little to no cost to maintain these online communities, we tend to stick with them a little bit longer, even in small groups, and I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the staying power that online spaces have relative to, the traditional brick and mortar. To your point, when we don't frequent brick and mortar things, the cost of upkeep is just prohibitive to those things continuing to exist. But online spaces definitely provide us the ability to come and go, and for those spaces to remain somewhat dormant until they're needed again. So that brings us to a really interesting piece about, how we've experienced this in our lives. So what would be an example, is there an example of what you just shared that kind of comes to mind for you of an online community that you frequented, kind of dropped, maybe just retracted from a little bit, and then were able to jump back in?
Well, that's a common occurrence for me in my current life, where I have several online communities that I'm a part of, and I kind of have to step away for IRL things, for other games, for other hobbies. And, when I come back, and there's always a sense of welcome, no one ever goes, hey, there's this, where have you been? You don't deserve to be here. It's welcome back, slot back into the position that you had before. So it's a very common occurrence, but one that comes to mind, and again, I'm going to lean very heavily on the gamer example here, but one that comes to mind is going to be this idea that, if anybody's familiar with the game World of Warcraft, right? It's a very popular online role-playing game that many people played. I never got much into it. But when they finally shut down the original servers for that game, thousands of people that hadn't touched it in years came back to witness the final moments. And the shutdown of a server for a video game is something that only a gamer will really truly empathize with, because this world that you've been a part of for so long, that you have a virtual or a digital representation in your avatar, ceases to exist in entirety. You'll never see that character again. You'll never play with those people in that same map, that same online place. You have to move on to something else. And again, they have a very long staying power, but eventually game companies will shut down their servers. And, when it's a game like World of Warcraft that has, I don't know what its peak concurrent player was, but it was in the millions of people, all of a sudden shuts down. That's something that's felt across the gaming community for sure. So yeah, like I come back all the time to various things, and it's always such a warm welcome. And then every now and then there's something unique in the community that happens that we all kind of band in and have a good time with. So I can think of many examples on my end, but I'm not going to nerd out too hard and bring you all into that fold.
Okay, so we've talked about social media, we've talked about gaming to some degree, and I think that certainly when we think of online communities, those are probably the first two that will naturally come up. Just, wanting to, for the sake of completeness or attempt at some other online communities that exist. Coming to mind for me, there is online collaboration software. Mm-hmm. So we, of course, in our channel and our podcast, we use Discord. There's also other products like Slack comes to mind that, certainly not only in the gaming community, but in the other arts, music, and use a lot of these platforms as well. I would say that obviously dating applications are their whole other kettle of fish, which I don't think there's enough time in the world for us to go into. But certainly, if we look at the millennial experience, which we'll get into here in a moment, as we always do, online dating had a revolutionary impact on our generation, and certainly generations coming up beneath us. There's so many. What other ones? I mean, I just spitballed a couple, but what other types of online communities are you familiar with that you've seen?
Reddit is a huge one for me. The 3D printing subreddits are huge. Anytime you're having a problem with a printer, you can't get something to work, you go on there, you ask for help. There's many people that are willing to help you diagnose an issue. When you print something really cool, everybody wants to see it, and then they come out like a flock of pigeons and seagulls, and they go, where's the STL? Give me the file so I can print it. So there's communities like that. There's the Reddit has so many ones where sometimes you just make an off comment on something and it'll spark a massive conversation. But every single time, for the most part, it is always offered in a sense of shared collaboration, shared support. You're always going to have those terrible people online because, like I said, you're a little bit sheltered. But if you're in a community that you feel passionate about, you manage to find some people that are really passionate to to also be a part of that community.
So you've talked about some really wonderful examples of how online communities have been such a positive influence in your life. And of course, this certainly plays off some of the conversations we had in the last episode about escapism and how, again, we want those spaces that we choose to escape to be largely positive places where we can go and be playful and be the best versions of ourselves. I think we would be remiss if we didn't speak to some of the more negative components that online communities can be. And I think that the biggest one for me is just the nature of them, in that you're not face to face with other people. So that perception of anonymity almost removes the expectation of consequence from behaviors or things we say. And so then you see platforms like X, especially, I think, has a bad reputation for just being an atrocious place to be, where people just go there to be trolls and assholes and go to try to piss everybody off or impose their opinion on others. And I just find it really, really interesting, this idea that where in a perfect world, I think our online communities would serve the purposes that you ascribe to, where you create spaces where people can go, they don't have to stay, and they can come back when they choose to, as is the virtue of being online. But so often people's experience in online communities is not that. It's one where it's filled with negativity. It's a place where we kind of let the worst versions of ourselves out because we're not actually talking to a real person. So I don't need to act with compassion or empathy or kindness. And you just see some like really shitty things said by some people. And I think that it's really, really unfortunate that that's the case. I'm curious, especially from your perspective as someone who's had such significant positive impact in your life because of online spaces, how do you think it came to be that online communities, some, of course, not all, came to be filled with so much animosity?
Because there will always be the bad apple. There will always be that person that looks at the anonymity and the detachment that online communities have as a way to express themselves in a way they wouldn't normally in life without a repercussion. And this is also a very important distinction to make with an online community and an online place. Now, what I mean by that is an online place is where anybody can go and do whatever they want. They can say a thing. The worst repercussion they might have if that online platform has a downvote button, right? Like I know that Facebook to this day does not have a thumbs down, right? But Reddit does. X, I don't know if it does, but like there's no repercussion really. You would need someone from the organization to step in and ban your account, which only seems to happen to the most highest profile kind of accounts these days. Where an online community, there are repercussions. If you do or say something that doesn't vibe with the community, you're downvoted pretty hard. People will go back through your post history and they will see, well, is this a one-off? Is he having a bad day? Or is he genuinely this kind of troll? In the very close-knit, tight communities, we usually have a leadership structure. So if you're doing something on regular, that leadership will take you aside and say, hey, this is not condoned. It's not part of the rules, because every online community has rules about how you're supposed to act, and you don't follow them, you'll get a warning, and then normally you're gone. So again, it's if you're going to go through the active effort of wanting to be part of an online community, you are seeking out a community that has those kind of things in place. And the biggest example I have is that my online community for one of the video games I play the most has an actual recruitment process. So if you want to be a part of the community, you have to fill out a questionnaire, explain who you are, a lot of your IRL stuff within reason. You're not giving your address and stuff away. And then you would usually come in for a trial, and they would see what your demeanor was like. And if they liked you, they would offer you a permanent position in the organization. And then in time, as things have gone by, you'll actually get promoted through the leadership structure to be like, hey, you're a great member of this community. We like your leadership skills. We're gonna up you so you have more roles and more responsibility and ability to lead the group. So if you're going to genuinely want to be part of an online community, which I recommend it massively, find one that has that kind of structure, that kind of good leadership, and that good that good kind of backing to it, and you almost will never have these issues. It's the communities or the areas that have no oversight and no repercussion to you being a jerk that you'll have the problems with.
Okay, so this is really, really interesting, and this is something that I hadn't once stopped to think about or maybe create any sort of like distinction between. The idea that we have online communities and we have online spaces, and as you were talking, it occurred to me that these things that you would describe as online spaces, whether it be, based on the way you're describing it, X certainly fits that. I would think that in a lot of cases, Instagram would, TikTok would. There are places where and spaces where we go to consume content and post content, and there is certainly high degrees of interaction, but interaction that in a lot of cases, now this certainly isn't like universal across any given platform, but certainly interaction that doesn't constitute community. And I think that's really, really interesting. That's something I'd never considered. And the other piece that as you're talking, I find really interesting about this idea of online spaces versus communities. Well, in the example of X, a lot of the time you've got people going on this platform to share an opinion or speak out on something that's happening in the real world. So they're not in fact going to interact with each other online for the sake of being a part of an online-based community, but they're in fact choosing that as a platform to speak out on something that is happening in the real world. And so in that way, a lot of these platforms also almost become online soapboxes where we're not actually doing anything to promote any sort of community, but rather we're going on there to feel like we're being heard. We're going on there to share something that we feel needs to be seen and needs to be recognized, and again, giving ourselves some sort of a what we perceive to be a low consequence soapbox to stand on.
Yeah, and I also think it comes down to how you represent yourself in terms of your username, right? If your username is your actual name, or if it's a verified account, you'll notice that those people are very careful with how they soapbox, right? Because if it's a platform for soapboxing, you're going to soapbox, but you're careful about it. When it's a random username that you could just, close that account and open it up again, people will shout to the high heavens anything that they want in any tone that they want, right? So it is a very granular experience, and for those people that are on the outside looking in, I can completely understand why it might not make sense to them. And why would I want to be part of an online community? It's, everybody has posted something on social media and got a negative comment or something that was unwelcome to them, or maybe not enough attention for what they thought they were doing, and it feels negative. But for people that are genuinely looking for a good community outside of their day-to-day life, online communities, in my opinion, are invaluable. And it's about finding the right one, which I think leads us really well into the next segment, which Matt has called Making
Actions Count. Of course, again, for those of you that didn't listen to our last episode, we just look for new and fun ways to really take advantage of our acronym, the MAC podcast. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about community and how these communities can be beneficial, looking and seeking out the right spaces, and certainly this has a unique impact on our ourselves in the world where there's such a prevalence of online spaces and places and communities. So yeah, we need to start talking now about what are we going to do about it. All these, we can't get away from online as much as sometimes we would like to.
Yeah.
So like, what is the step? You talked about the right online communities. How do we identify what that right online community is for us, and what are those steps that we need to take next?
Well, and I think that right now, more than ever, finding a good community is actually pretty easy. And I know that a lot of our listeners were not super thrilled to jump into the idea of Discord. I know you in particular, you're like, what's Discord? How do I use this thing? But if you have a content creator that you like to watch, 9 times out of 10, they will have a Discord. All right. I saw today Discord has over 150 million concurrent users. So it means at any point in time, there's 150 million people using the Discord platform.
The far cry from the 7,000 people on Well in 1985.
Right. It's not just for gamers. It's for every sort of every aspect of online community and interest. So if you have a content creator that you resonate with, that you like the stuff that they do, you like the demeanor they have, 9 times out of 10, they will have a Discord, or there will be a Discord that they are a part of. And you can step into those. And again, there's usually some sort of leadership or organizational structure. You have to follow certain rules. You have to go through certain things, which may sound off-putting, but it really is not as crucial or as crazy as people think it is. But you can step into that, and if it's an active Discord, there is 100 conversations going on at the same time. And you can pick the ones you want to be a part of. You can filter down into the things that you want to talk about. So it can become pretty easy if you have, just that ability to jump into it. If you don't have a content creator that you like, usually Reddit, if there's a subreddit you like, they will have a Discord. If by crazy happenstance you can't find that, I know there are websites that list Discord communities, and you can filter by category or by topic, and you can find one. Now, I'm saying Discord because it's the most prevalent, but it's not the only one. There are lots of Facebook groups if you're more a Facebook user. I know Pinterest to a degree has something there as well. But all it comes down to is finding an interest that you enjoy the vibe of, the people that you're going to be communicating with. Because if you don't enjoy that communication, you're not going to take part in that community. It's just like real life. If I didn't like the way Matt talked, I probably wouldn't be friends with him, right? But you get exposed to so many people, and then what ends up happening is you'll be chatting with 1 or 2 people in particular, and you're like, I really like that person. And then, you become friends, and you start having your own side conversations. And those people grow into actual lifelong friends. I have actual lifelong friends that I met playing video games that live halfway across the world, right? So it's really quite easy to get into that. And I think my biggest encouragement for you is if you have something, and we encourage you all the time to find a new skill or a new hobby or a new something. If you have something that you're like, I'd love to talk to people about this, but nobody else I know is into it, go find an online community. You're going to have so much fun talking about those things in the nerdiest of ways.
I love that. I do. And I think that's such a proactive way to think about how we can go out and seek out people that have the same interests and passions and purpose that we do. I'm going to take my action step or my make action count suggestion tonight a little bit different. I think that, certainly I'm so glad that you've gotten to share with everybody how you approach online communities and the ways in which you get to participate with wonderful people around the world. I also recognize that for a lot of our listeners, that's probably not the reality they're facing right this second, right? For a lot of people, me among them, my participation online largely is the classic like doom scrolling and getting into the sinkhole of depressing world news and posts that you see on different online platforms. And so I think from that standpoint, I think this episode, I hope, is a really good, it's a really good opportunity for each of us to take a second and really audit the ways in which we're participating online and then decide for yourself, am I participating online in ways that is constructive, it's fulfilling, it's adding to my bucket rather than taking away, right? Like these are all things that we can pay attention to, that we can audit. The first thing that I would suggest everybody do is pick up your phone and go write your screen time and let your phone be the first one to tell you how much time you're spending on certain apps, certain social media applications. Where are you spending that time? And when you see that number, one, it's going to shock you, but two, are you okay with that? And what if you took half of the time you spent doom scrolling and you used it to do something else, to go and find that online community that you're in search of, right? So just be really, really conscious. I think that one of the challenges with having a supercomputer in the palm of our hand or in our pocket within arm's reach 99% of our lives is we become blinded to the amount of time that we sink in that we could be doing other things and impacting the world in a different way. And so I think that the first step, just like anything else, is we need to make ourselves aware of just how impactful it is, just how much time. Because I bet you if you go to that phone right now and you look at your screen time, it'll shock the hell out of you. And so I think that's where we need to start. We need to be real with ourselves and then start to decide what we're going to do if we're not happy about the amount of time that we're seeing.
Yeah. And hey, just because we're encouraging you to find an online community does not mean that that's the answer for you. If you find that doom scrolling is a big thing and you're like, I don't think I want to spend that much time on my phone, and you want to go completely offline and go do something, go do it. Go do it. There's no reason you shouldn't. But if you're like, I'm going to be on my phone anyways, what if I was doing something more productive? I was forming a better relationship with someone. I was learning a new skill. Then great. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for you to do that there as well. And Matt, do you have any other major things you want to say about this topic, or are we ready to kind of move into our closing icebreaker?
Yeah, let's bring it home.
Okay. So, and again, I'm interested to hear your response to this. What's a unique way that an online community celebrates or could celebrate a milestone for you?
So, this is another one that I struggled with. I think that the most common way, and I know this is the opposite of the question, but the most common way usually is the length of time that you've participated in a thing. And I just wish that instead of celebrating the amount of time that someone spent on a thing, that we started to use different metrics to celebrate milestones. So for me, like Duolingo is one that comes to mind as something that I do every day, which, again, interactive aspects, but I'm not so sure that it would go so far as to be an online community. However, I just wish that instead of counting the number of days that I spent, if it, you now know this many verbs in Spanish, right? Like you've learned this many words, you've spoken 879 sentences in your Duolingo career. I just wish that there would be a little bit more creativity, because the beauty of online communities is the metrics exist. So why not use them to be more creative in terms of how we celebrate people participating in these spaces?
It's very true. All of the data is there, and it may sound super silly, but there are actually Discord servers, and like Discord has it genuinely built in to award you for the number of comments that you've made, the number of upvotes that you've gotten, which fake internet points are still fake internet points, but sometimes it is very rewarding. On my side, the unique way is this kind of advancement, this leadership structure advancement that I've experienced, because in the couple of times that I've been, awarded a rank increase, it has come along with a very genuine comment. We've noticed that you're, really taking to leadership in this area. People really seem to like you. We've gotten some great comments about you. Therefore, we'd like to offer you this promotion. And that to me meant so much more than the promotion did. And, that's something that I'm sure anybody that's any sort of military background would empathize with. Unfortunately, Discord servers don't come with an increase in pay, but, just the simple, nice comments that come with that. And then like, hey, everybody else congratulating you on getting that advancement. That's something that I think is genuinely unique to a good online community.
So something that I want to point out there, and maybe is kind of the thought that's, will anchor this episode, I hope, for a lot of people. When we talk about online community, we're still talking about community, and therefore we're still talking about people.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that everything we've talked about in this episode has been about having online spaces and technology being the vessel or the container or the vehicle by which we host community. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how nice the vehicle is, there still needs to be people getting in that vehicle with you. And so you're telling me that with all the technology and all the evaluative methodology that goes into collecting data and information and analytics on these online systems, that it still comes back to the human being.
Yeah.
And the most fulfilling thing is still that compliment that you receive from another human, regardless of whether they're in the computer in the next room or the computer half a world away. And I think that we need to remember that no matter where we're participating, that there is still a human being on the other side that is creating what we think of as that sense of community.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, I want to kind of bring this episode to a close. I think it was a really interesting topic of conversation, and another great example of how maybe I have a sense of expertise or experience into something that maybe you don't, but how we can kind of play off of each other and continue to grow and experience. And that's really exciting to me. So my gratitude for today is going to be your willingness to accept that you do not know what you do not know, and to have a genuine curiosity in those things, and let those that have a little bit more experience lead with their best foot. And I think that is the great sign of a leader and the great sign of a good friend. So I appreciate that, and I'm very grateful for that of you in you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really grateful for you that you're able to take something that in really popular discourse we think of as being such a negative thing and drawing such positive optimism around it, and to create such a blissful narrative or idea around how we can use technology in online spaces is really, really inspiring. And I hope that a lot of people take that inspiration to really shift the way that they participate online. So thank you for being that inspiration for us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope in gratitude from all of our listeners that they come and join us on our Discord server so that we can start to have these great conversations. In fact, we're in Discord right now. So maybe if you ever wanted to come and listen on an episode taping, or maybe have some questions, maybe a listener kind of episode, we could make that work. But we gotta grow the Discord here a little bit, people. So I'll post some instructions on how to join, just if you're not familiar, and maybe we'll have that happen.
Amazing. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to share some of that precious investment with us. And we hope that whatever interactions you have with those online communities continue to fulfill you and add to your cup.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you for joining us on the Millennials and Community Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Trevor.